Today I decided to give you guys the Resident Evil films. This is a series of films that started in 2002, ended in 2017, and they got rebooted in 2021. All in all, these films are pretty fun, but they can also be hokey and downright bad. So without further ado, I decided to give you guys my ranking from worst to best. Coming in at number 7 is Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. Released in 2017 and directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, this is the final one in the original series of films, and it's by far the worst. It's a really terrible plot this time around. It completely contradicts most of the other movies. Most of the main characters from the games are completely dead at this point, and it's full of bad jump cuts every few seconds. I shit you not when I say it's one of the worst edited films I have ever seen in my life. There's literally one fight scene in this movie that has 100 cuts in it, or more, and it's only like a 1-minute sequence. The film cuts every few seconds, and I don't know why. Paul Anderson is not the best director in the world, but his films do not cut that much. Even other films he directed in the series don't cut that much. And I can only assume the editor was just either high off his ass or had a vendetta against the director. I don't know. A terrible film with bad action, loose plot points that just never get resolved. It's just bad all the way around. It literally gave me a headache when I was watching it. I haven't seen it in years, and I pretty much refuse to watch it again. Absolutely terrible. Avoid this piece of shit at all costs. Coming in at number 6 is 2007's Resident Evil Extinction. This one basically follows the events after Apocalypse a few years later and shows the world being turned into a desolate wasteland, akin to basically Mad Max. This one is kind of crazy and off the rails, and all the sequels after it contradict it. What I mean by that is the world is basically a barren wasteland in this one, and we see the world in the other movies, there's foliage, kind of a one-off entry, honestly. Not a bad movie. Alice basically gets powers in this one, which is kind of neat, but they don't really go anywhere interesting with that. It's an okay little sequel, but pretty forgettable. Up next is Resident Evil: Welcome to Raccoon City. Released in 2021, this film was basically an attempt to reboot the Resident Evil franchise without Milla Jovovich. Unfortunately, the results were not very good, and we have a film that is more accurate to the games, but is also just kind of lazy. For one, they crap on a lot of the original characters, especially Leon S. Kennedy, who was played terrible this time by an actor that looks much more like Carlos from Resident Evil 3. Ultimately, the performances are bad. The story's pretty bad. They try to cram 2 video games, Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 2, into one movie. It's also rather short, considering the fact that it's basically 2 games stuffed into one, and it just doesn't work. It's just a complete mess. Some of the characters are okay, like the actress playing Claire here is fine. For the most part, a completely forgettable cast, bad visual effects, possibly the worst CGI in the entire franchise, or at least since the first movie. And all in all, just something that I don't really recommend that highly. It's not a terrible film, but wasted potential and wasted opportunity. Coming in at number 4 is Resident Evil Afterlife. This film was kind of interesting because, like I said, it somewhat undoes the destroyed world from part 3, and there's like foliage and water and food and everything. So it's a little bit contradictory to the previous films, but this one, the action is pretty damn good. The performances are probably better than that one. And get to see Chris Redfield and Claire Redfield, which is always nice. A lot of the film takes place in this old rundown prison, and the finale takes place on a boat. Not a lot about this one like sticks out as one of the better movies, but it's decent. It's pretty much where it belongs, right in the middle of the pack. The action's pretty good. They take away Alice's powers in this one, making it, a little bit more believable. And some of the side characters are pretty good this time around. Not one of the best movies ever, but definitely a fun Resident Evil film, and it's just entertaining. I do like this one. Coming in at number 3 is 2004's Resident Evil Apocalypse. This movie's pretty interesting. It's actually just Resident Evil 3 made into a movie. What I mean by that is the Nemesis is here. It takes place in the rundown Raccoon City. There's several survivors from the game, including Jill Valentine. And everyone's just trying to survive and not get killed as the city's about to be destroyed. And it's overrun by zombies. It's pretty much the sequel you all wanted after the first film. It's basically the one that I'd say out of the original 6 is probably closest to the games. And it's very enjoyable, if not hokey and campy. None of these films I would consider necessarily good movies, but they're fun schlock, and this one embraces it much more than the first film. But it's not quite as entertaining as the first film, in my opinion. I still really like this sequel, and I think it's rather fun. Nemesis looks great, even if he doesn't really act that great. And this is just a fun follow-up to the first film, and one that I recommend. Coming in at number 2 is 2002's Resident Evil. This movie is loosely based on the first video game, Resident Evil, And it's not bad. It's basically one of Paul W.S. Anderson's earlier films. Milla Jovovich basically plays this character named Alice, wakes up in this mansion. She finds out that she's used to work for Umbrella. All hell breaks loose when a team of mercenaries comes in, and basically her and these mercenaries have to try to survive. Michelle Rodriguez is also in this one as well. You get to see the lickers and the zombies take over the mansion. It's basically an abridged version of the first game, only with a new protagonist. It's not a bad movie, and I actually think some of the effects are kind of dated and doesn't look great visually by today's standards, but it's just a fun opening entry to the series. It's not as over the top as some of the later entries. It's kind of grounded, which is I think why I like this one so much. It is still over the top, mind you, but compared to some of the later sequels, this one is basically a normal movie. An enjoyable, fun romp into the first Resident Evil game in film form. If you're a fan of the games, I think you'll enjoy this one. It's nothing great, but it's not bad either. It's a decent, fun zombie flick. But coming in at number 1, and possibly a surprise to some, is 2012's Resident Evil Retribution. This one is just really entertaining. Basically, they have no qualms about going over the top and crazy with this one. This one basically has these labs that are designed like major cities. One is designed like Moscow, another one like Tokyo, another one like New York, and then the biggest one is basically just a suburb area somewhere in America. This is a fun movie that is batshit crazy, over the top. You get Leon Kennedy this time around, as well as Barry Burton and Jill Valentine. They kind of like round out the cast with as many video game characters that they haven't used as possible. And it's pretty interesting. You even get Ada Wong in this movie, who is dubbed terribly by a different actress. But all in all, it's still a very entertaining film. It's dumb, it's kind of stupid, it's over the top, but it embraces that stupidity, much like the later Fast and Furious movies. Should have been the end of the franchise, I feel. If you just tweaked the ending, you could have had it to where they stop the apocalypse and it all ends here, and then we could have avoided the shitfest that is the final chapter. And to me, this is the last film. It also has an amazing soundtrack. The other films have kind of just like generic rock mixed in, but this one actually has a really cool theme and an awesome opening sequence where it shows the events that happen after 4 in reverse as the boat from 4 is assaulted by Umbrella. All in all, a very fun entry and one that I actually highly recommend. It's schlock, it's stupid, but it knows what it is, and it's very entertaining. Resident Evil Retribution, my absolute favorite of the Resident Evil franchise. Well, that's my list. Unfortunately, there's never been a great Resident Evil movie. I am a big fan of this series and have several of the games. You know, even the classic trilogy and 2 on N64 and many of the remakes on PS4. And ultimately, I just really enjoy the Resident Evil franchise. It's probably one of my favorite video game franchises. I'd probably have to put it like top 3 or 4. It's a shame that we never had a movie that was really accurate to the games. And the closest we got as far as accuracy goes is probably the first Resident Evil and Welcome to Raccoon City to a degree. But they're pretty much all schlocky and kind of hokey. Probably this to a lesser degree, but it's also much less entertaining. It'd be cool if one day we had a Resident Evil film that really respected the video games and was much more serious. Essentially something along the lines of like Night of the Living Dead mixed with, you know, a decent shoot 'em up action movie. Nothing too over the top like The Matrix, which is what these films basically are, but something a little more grounded. One day I hope we do get that movie, but unfortunately I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. But until then, we do have, you know, about 4 good movies and 3 not so good ones. But all in all, I still do enjoy this franchise despite its flaws. I thank you all for watching, and peace out.